Everybody, I'm Frank Gruber, the co-CEO of Established. Welcome back. Thanks for being here with us today at the summit. Before we get started, I want to share with our next conversation, I want to share some information about becoming part of the community and engaging here with the summit. So if you get a chance and you want to be part of the conversation, go to Twitter and you can use the hashtag Startup of Year. And if you're watching this particular session, make sure that you use the hashtag Startup of Year and the word Contactually, which is the company, the name of the company that our next guest founded and eventually sold. And basically, if you do tweet some of the things you like, some of your favorite quotes, or maybe a photo of yourself watching the summit or something, and become a part of the discussion, we'll pick some winners from our favorite tweets from that conversation and give you a book, right? So we're going to be talking about to Zvi Band. He's an old friend of mine from the DC tech community. Zvi is an engineer, a seasoned entrepreneur, a developer, strategist, and startup advisor. He wears a lot of hats. He's the co-founder and CEO of Contactually, which I mentioned a moment ago, which is a top CRM which basically helps professionals keep track of people. It focuses on a number of different industries. You could use it for anything. And it was acquired by Compass in 2019. He's also been named a Washingtonian Tech Titan 3 times over, and was a finalist in the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Washington City Paper, among a number of other publications for his successes as well as his companies. Welcome, Zvi Band. Thank you so much for joining us.
Frank, thanks so much for having me. I feel like you and I have known each other through like 3 to 4 to 5 different stages of our career. So it's awesome to reconnect.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And it's been, I mean, we first connected in the DC community when you first started doing your first, I think it was your first dev. You just left a bigger firm and you started your own dev shop, and you're building different people's apps and focus on doing client projects. And you kind of, if I remember correctly, you really didn't think that networking or being out there and connecting with people was like that important, because you were kind of cranking away, and obviously that's changed. Can you share kind of your then and now?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm someone that when I first went to college, I considered going home every weekend because I didn't want to have to talk to people, and I thought, like, even when I graduated, being a software developer, my job was just to kind of, sit in a cubicle, write code, and that's it. Very quickly learned that wasn't my path. And so started just building relationships in the DC scene. I think, Frank, you and I maybe have even met at like one of the first bar camps, like back when
I remember bar camp.
Right?
It was 12 years ago or so. And it's funny because that came up as a memory this last weekend, which is awesome. Really funny. Good timing.
I saw the shirt. So through that, I just started getting to know people. And through that, I just saw amazing things started happening. I got job offers. And when I started my consulting firm, I started working with the likes of Ford and CBS and Volkswagen. And this was all very foreign for me, right? I never really had to do any marketing, but I didn't necessarily know where the business came from. And I looked, and it didn't come from marketing or BD. It just came from just knowing the right people and having the right people know me. And so from there, I learned that pretty much my relationships were my most important asset. And that's honestly what led us to start Contactually.
That makes sense. So what was your kind of aha moment with Contactually? They were like, oh, we've got to do this and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, there are a couple key insights that we had. One, as I mentioned, is that relationships are our most important asset moving forward, right? That like just being good at what you do is table stakes. And especially when the knowledge gap has decreased, our skills gap has decreased, because I can work with anyone around the world who can Google just the same thing as me. What really sets us apart is our reputation amongst others. So that is one of the other key insights. The second is that while relationships, matter more than ever, our human brains haven't necessarily changed that much, right? Like, think of the number of people that we need to connect and work with over the course of our career. Well, the human brain can only maintain around 150 or so active relationships at any one point in time.
So it's only 150. That's it?
Roughly 150. It's like sociologist Robin Dunbar came up with Dunbar's number, appropriately named, and showed that the average human can maintain 150 or so social relationships. So the question is, okay, if we need to connect with thousands, over the course of our lifetime, but we can only maintain relationships with, 100 or so at a time, well, how can technology come in and help us augment that, right? How can technology say, hey, you haven't spoken to Frank in 6 years. Here's all the details about him and Jen, the family, and how you can leverage that relationship to stay in touch in some way. And so that was the core idea behind Contactually, is how can we help you maintain relationships beyond what you already can kind of remember at any one point in time.
Right. So you pulled a team together. Was you kind of your idea? Then what happened next? You found a team and started building it out.
Yeah, actually, so it was, I remember wrote down the idea in Evernote May 15th, 2011. Just, again, as just one of the random ideas. I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be great if if there was a proactive CRM, like a CRM that was actually proactive in helping you with your relationships.
Right.
I had a small team working with me at the time. And so I think in late June, we started working on the prototype and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we hacked it together? And within a few weeks, we had a working prototype. Frank, you may have been among the first 100 or so users or so.
Yep.
I definitely know Joe was.
We still use it. We still have an account.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And again, through my relationships, right, I thought there was something there, but didn't necessarily say, oh my God, this is going to change the world. But through my relationships, you and I know, some of the partners at 500 Startups.
Right.
So I was out in the Bay Area just doing some business travel, happened to show it to a partner, 500 Startups, and they said, hey, I'm going to I would fund this on the spot as long as you focus on this and really try and make this a real thing. And to be honest, most people think that oh, startups, they start with some big grand vision of how they want to change the world. In this case, no. Actually, it was a lot of intense debates between myself and our my two friends who would end up becoming co-founders of this about whether or not we want to focus on this and is there a real thing. And over time, we've decided that, okay, yes, focusing on this was the right thing to do. And the 500 Startups experience was that burn the boats moment to say, hey, we're going all in on making Contactually a reality.
Right. So you guys basically quit your day jobs, started it out, built a prototype, got out there, went to 500 Startups. What did you find the most helpful about that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty incredible. And I always recommend, for anyone considering any kind of accelerator incubator, to be very clear about what you want going into the program. For us, we didn't honestly, again, we just kind of threw together the company, literally the company was technically incorporated on the day we got funding from 500 Startups because we were just kind of coming together that quickly. But for us, as I reflect in hindsight, what was most valuable about it was the pressure cooker, right? Was that, most incubators have a 3 to 4 month time span, at which point you're done. Usually there's some big kind of demo day or coming out event or something like that, or launch. And for us, we said, okay, we have 4 months to make this a company. So we went from obviously having our day jobs and having an apartment, and having our lives in DC to all of a sudden being across the country in Mountain View. We had the classic startup story of we had an empty apartment with 3 mattresses on the floor because we were working 18 hours a day in the office, then we'd go home and sleep for 6 hours and that's it. And that really helped bring the company. So we entered as this prototype and we left as a real initial product, that we had customers and we started having, the first, few dollars coming in, and we saw that, okay, there's a real thing there.
Right. Sounds like a 4-month sprint, right? To get something going.
Yeah. And honestly, as building a startup, the most important thing sometimes is you need that to switch into that right mentality. And for us, it was our way of just hurling ourselves off a cliff and say, okay, we got to survive in some way.
That makes sense. All right. So, I mean, obviously, you went through the program, you raised some funding. I think you ended up raising, if I get the number right, about 12 million in funding, and continue to build the product and the audience or customers. What was that like? I mean, how did you find it? I mean, both coming from, I've run companies as well, and I know what my answer would be. I'm curious to hear what yours is about that. What was that, 5 to 7 years of running a company?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, And this is something I'm spending a lot of time reflecting on
Mhm.
moving forward, because one of the more amazing things that someone can hopefully take advantage of in the afterglow of a startup, whether it goes well or doesn't, is like,
Mhm.
what did you learn?
Yep.
And to be honest, like, listen, you take a step back and you're like, all right, Contactually ramped from, $0 to $10 million, in annual recurring revenue.
Mhm.
We raised a whole bunch of money. We built a great team. We had great Glassdoor reviews. We had a great company culture. We had amazing customers, and we really changed the lives of the people that we work with. And we're very thankful for that. Internally, I spent 7.5 years in survival mode.
Right.
And really just like saying, okay, what do I need to do to keep the company afloat for another month, another year, et
Mhm.
cetera?
Mhm.
And the moment you raise a round of capital, or the moment you land a big customer, it's just like, all right, on to the next thing. What do we need to do to get to the next point?
Mhm.
And I never really internalized how I could make sure that, hey, the company's great and
Mhm.
everything afterwards is just all about aspirational.
Mhm.
And so that was a big challenge. Obviously, like, we made a number of, not pivots, but like business transitions over the 7.5 years. The two big ones are, we start off as a very generic CRM built around relationships, right?
Mhm.
We had financial advisors and consultants and entrepreneurs and people who called themselves witch doctors and people who focused on like controlling prison rights. We'd all sorts of like different personas and different kinds of customers using us.
Mhm.
However, we knew that in order, if you're one of the books I always recommend to entrepreneurs is Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Um,
Mhm.
Really great book, but and Frank, you probably read it and know the
Mhm.
core idea. But in order to go from early adopters to early majority to late majority laggards, like, most startups fail going from early adopters to early majority. And the solution to make that jump, that chasm, is to focus on a particular niche. So
Right.
we saw this really interesting cohort of real estate agents come on board that we knew nothing about.
Mhm.
Ended up learning more and deciding initially to focus on residential real estate as one of our initial markets. And it ended up being our biggest market. Despite us not being a real estate CRM, we ended up becoming the best CRM for real estate agents, which is why Compass acquired us last year.
Right.
So that was definitely one of the bigger ones.
Congratulations, by the way. That's a heck of a run and a nice win there.
Thank you, thank you. The other point that I think is a good lesson learned, and this is obviously, like, I would say, like, anyone building a B2B company that needs to think a bunch about, is whether is your type of customer that you're serving.
Mhm.
The general two buckets are, you can serve SMBs or
Mhm.
you can serve mid-market.
Mhm.
We start off serving SMBs, but
Right.
then very quickly learned that enterprise was much stronger on almost all unit economics. And as it stands, most venture investors really much prefer enterprise companies.
Mhm.
There's some swing back to focus on SMBs,
Mhm.
but we start off focusing on SMBs, like literally like individual real estate agents, consultants, and then slowly moved up to the point where the majority of our business was serving larger enterprises.
All right. So let's just rewind for 1 second. I want to hear a little bit more about that acquisition. And can you tell us the story? What happened? How did that all come together?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share what I can, obviously, because as you know, like, with M&A, there's a lot
Right.
of things that you can't talk about. But
Sure.
high level, obviously, like, as we were growing, a few years into our journey, like, we saw this company, it was actually called Urban Compass at the time, start up, and we started seeing real estate agents from Compass, join the platform, or agents of ours who are customers, move over to Compass. So of course, as we started focusing on selling to enterprises, in our case, real estate brokerages, we started building relationship with Compass. And over time, we built more of a relationship with them. I think at one point, like 20% of Compass agents were customers of ours. So I ended up building more of a personal relationship with Robert, the co-founder and CEO, to
Mhm.
the point where just, all of a sudden, like, at a 9 p.m. call one Tuesday night, out of the blue, like, he reached out to us
Mhm.
and said, hey, like, would you be interested in like having a conversation about joining forces?
Wow.
And obviously, it was a long relationship that ended up after that ended up leading to the acquisition back in February of 2019.
Yep.
But really, like, again, the takeaway, not to spoil it, was that relationships are so important. That we had done so much work to build a relationship, not just with like Compass staff, but more importantly with our customers who ended up joining Compass, and then of course
Right.
with like Robert and his team, to the point where once we were kind of looking at like that term sheet saying, hey, is this the right thing to do, we had high confidence both sides that like, hey, this is a match made in heaven.
No, that makes sense. And he literally called. I mean, it surprised me that he picked up the phone and called. Some a lot of times people are emailing and whatnot in this day and age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think again, to the point like that, we had built up enough of a relationship that I think he felt totally comfortable just like calling me out of the blue,
Yep.
as I did, of course, like previously reaching out to him, etc.
Right. Makes sense. All right. So then you had the acquisition come through. Now you're inside Compass. What is that like? I mean, you're running Contactually as Contactually still, right?
Yeah, so we're running Contactually still. That's still up and running and completely available for anyone who wants to use it. Internally, the hypothesis behind the investment was Contactually is a really great CRM platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is just that. It does not do anything else. It doesn't do real estate search. It doesn't do marketing automation, or it doesn't do transaction management, all the different things that, like, let's say a real estate agent may need. Now, obviously, we have APIs, so you can basically plug anything you want, but it's not the same as having one integrated platform. So the idea behind Compass acquiring us was, hey, how can we take all of Contactually's learning and airdrop it inside of Compass and build a real integrated platform? So now we're kind of taking a lot of that thinking and rebuilding it inside of the Compass platform.
Wow.
For me, honestly, it's really been a true gift. I consider Contactually to be 7.5 years of business education that I happen to get paid for.
Mm-hmm.
And so having the transition, post acquisition, where it's not like, okay, day after the acquisition, completely different company, I'm out on the street and that's it, but actually allows me to take so much of our learnings and our team and our technology and drop it in a new company that's ever so slightly different. Obviously, like, Compass is a massive company at this point, on an incredible run rate,
Right.
but seeing how tiny shifts of culture can result in very big different business decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing how you take a team of 70 people who work together at Contactually, put them in a team of 2,000 people, plus another 18,000 agents or so,
Right.
and watching how that team works, it's given me a really great insight into cultural design, about like the cultural value of ownership, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or transparency, and how you figure out how that scales inside a bigger company. And honestly, it's given me some great lessons I will take with me on future ventures.
That's amazing. And I've also seen just an overall transformation from being that just a developer to like this leader in this of how many employees now that are you managing?
Yeah, I mean, so Compass, Contactually at the time of acquisition was 70, and now I think all in all, the team that's under us or touching us is around 140.
Wow. Did you ever think you'd be running a company that has that many people?
I had no idea whatsoever. I mean, to be honest, like I realized this, I never did much foresight or thinking into the future. Like, I remember honestly, like when my senior of college, I went to a job fair. Someone, offered me a job like within a few months of the job fair, and I took it. Right. I didn't necessarily have as much thought into like, hey, what is my 3 to 5, 10-year vision, and who do I want to be? So no, like if I were to rewind back even to when you and I first met, like I had no idea I'd be here.
Right. It's awesome. It's been awesome to watch. All right. So let's talk about your book. It came out last year. It's the success in your sphere, leveraging the power of relationships to achieve your business goals. Talk about so tell me, what was your, first off, you talked already about how, relationships are the most important asset. And that's a big part of this book. Can you tell me what was kind of the impetus for writing the book, and who did you want to get this in the hands of?
Yeah, really great question. So With Contactually, like we built a CRM platform, right? That was really great at taking whatever business strategy you wanted to have to nurture relationships and implementing it, right? So for example, if I wanted to stay in touch with investors, right? Or if I wanted to gain more repeat referral business clients, Contactually would be a really amazing tool for that. But the problem is we were just a tool, right? And to achieve a real outcome, you need a strategy, right? Which is tools and systems and processes and habits, et cetera. And so we realized that like what a lot of our customers were missing was they were missing the strategy, right? They could figure out how to use Contactually, and we were really great at teaching them how to use Contactually. What they're missing was, okay, how do I use Contactually to grow my business, right? So for example, one of the big challenges we saw is that when we saw why a lot of people were churning out, the number one reason why a customer would churn was, I just didn't have time to use it, right? And so it's clear that there was some kind of habit issue missing. That relationship building is a long-term strategy, but you need that habit that's going to help you in that short term, right? And so that's not something like software, will, like a CRM will.
I mean, there were some things in there you try to do, like you did nudges and things like that, but that only goes so far until you turn it off. And you're like, well, I'm not going to get nudged anymore. Right?
Exactly, right. We had a lot of game mechanics built in the platform.
Like the bucket game was another one, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, people still love it, right? But we saw that like what we needed to distill the thousands and thousands of customer interactions of best practices and watching what, why some people were successful and why many others weren't, and how could we distill that? And that ended up being the mass of the book, Success is in Your Sphere.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so everyone, obviously has relationships, and you mentioned earlier the number that we can actually manage, and it goes up like, so I think it, certain number for family and friends, and obviously the most that you can manage outside of that family and friend kind of bucket is 150-ish, you mentioned. So how does one do that? Over time, how do you stay in touch with those people? And obviously you built technology to do it, but without being transactional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming off as transactional,
Yeah, I mean, the great thing to think about, and I love the Maya Angelou quote, right? That people may forget, I'm butchering it, but people may forget what you did or forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Right. So the essence of a lot of our relationship marketing strategies is, okay, how do I maintain a personal, authentic relationship with this person? How do I make sure they feel that like I care about them? Right. And how do I actually like genuinely do that? Right. And if we were to take that, then we can think about, well, how can technology augment that in some way? Right. So, the few things that we focused on is, well, who do I need to talk to? When should I engage with them? And what should I say? Right. And so we thought in the book and in the software about how do we build strategies behind that. Right. So for example, Frank, you and I honestly may not have spoken in 3 or 4 years at this point, other than maybe the odd tweet because we share the same birthday or something.
Right. Yeah. Right. Hey. Yep.
Yeah, but like, I can have a CRM system that says, okay, make sure I stay in touch with Frank every 90 days or so, right?
Right.
And I may forget a lot of information about you, but I can log in my CRM or other tool, because I make a habit of taking notes that like, oh yeah, like Frank's really into llamas, right? And he actually had a llama at his and Jen's wedding, right?
Right. Yep. Love
right. And so I can think about those little notes. And so the next time I'm reaching out to you saying, hey, Frank, long time no see. Honestly, like I was actually just at a farm this weekend in West Virginia and I saw some llamas and thought of you, right?
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I get excited
about llamas in West Virginia, right?
Yeah.
And so like, it's things like that will say, like that will get you to feel, wow, like Zvi really cares about me. So if I were to reach out to and ask, or if there was some opportunity that you think I'd be great for, right, there's a much higher chance of you remembering about me, right? Totally. So we kind of unpack a lot of these strategies around how to nurture and maintain personal and authentic relationships in the book.
And you call it the capital strategy. And I'm curious, you don't have to go through them all because I don't want to spoil it, but the capital strategy, does that have to do with like DC being the capital, or where did you come up with that?
I wish I could say like, oh my God, like it was some amazing moment or something like that. But honestly, it was, us looking for some kind of like mnemonic that would allow people to very easily like remember it. And
Right.
so we were thinking about all the different steps and all the different words or letters we could use for those steps. And it turned
Right.
out that, oh, capital actually like does work. And as it happens, we're a DC based company. So sure, right?
Makes sense. Yeah, totally. All right. And I know we're starting to kind of run tight on time here. So I'm going to kind of quick fire some of these questions.
Yes.
So, you're basically, how do we're all kind of living in this pandemic world right now, and who knows if that's going to change for any time soon. So wanted to know, like, with that, how does that impact, building these relationships? We used to go grab coffee or grab a cocktail or go meet somebody for a meeting, and now we're doing it over Zoom or whatever other, conferencing tool you're using. How is that? How have you taken that, and what are some tips, I guess, for people that are trying to connect?
Relationships are built around shared experiences, right? It's a shared experience over coffee. It's a shared experience over having been to a bar camp together, et cetera, right? We're, for better or for worse, we're all going through this, horrible pandemic, this amazing turbulent time, right? Of the pandemic and climate change and the election that passed, et cetera, right? Use that as an opportunity, right? One of the first things that I do, for example, you could reach out to literally anyone ever, right? That you've ever spoken to and saying, hey, listen, I know this is a crazy time. How are you and your family doing, right? Because honestly, there's a good chance that things aren't as good as they were a year ago, right?
Right.
And that, for better or for worse, is a shared experience that we're always going through. So I honestly say, hey, start with just checking in on how someone's doing personally.
That's a great tip. And you're right. We're all going through something right now, whether it be any of those you mentioned, and hopefully, there's not going to be more of that as 2020 continues to roll through here, like a freight train. So yeah. So I guess one more, kind of dialing it back to measuring success. I always like, this book is about success in this sphere. How do you measure success when you're managing those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where you have to believe, right? Anyone can look in the rearview mirror and see all the amazing things that happened in their life because they had the right relationships. Moving forward, it's hard. You just have to kind of take that and take the bet, saying, hey, this is worth the time. You can, of course, measure some things. So for example, in Contactually, like we showed you the number of healthy relationships you had, and and we give you a grade based on that. But honestly, I think it's really starting off with saying, hey, what are my goals? And then being able to see in not a week or two am I moving towards those goals, but in a year or two, hey, have I manifested those goals in some way, and can relationships, play a part in that?
That's great. And then just one last thought, as everyone's out there making sure that they're making, relationships, which you're calling their most important asset, which I agree with. What should they be doing? Like, one thing they could be doing today to kind of improve their, obviously there's a little bit of equation between luck and this as well. Improve their luck and build a successful business or relationship or whatever they're trying to do.
Honestly, I'll give a couple simple tips. One, block time off in your calendar, right? Just block time off in your calendar to not be reactive to your email or reactive to what you see on Twitter, but instead find the time to be proactive, right? Think about who you want to talk to, not who's talking to you. And honestly, if you're struggling to figure out who to talk to, I'm sure there are probably people that are already cycling through your mind. But one of the little tips I give to people is, if you can't figure out anything else to do, go to your inbox, go back 5 or 6 pages or something like that, and find someone who you haven't talked to, right? Yeah.
Right.
Or honestly, I open up my messages, screen on my phone, scroll down a few pages, and like find someone that like, oh, I haven't talked to Brandon since August, right? Like, why don't I just send him a quick text message, right? Just find a way to circulate the relationships that you already have.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think that 150 number is interesting. And actually, since reading your book and just kind of thinking about all this stuff again, I mean, I always feel like relationships matter. I feel like I've always felt like Dale Carnegie's book is one of the, one of those other books that people should read about, making friends and influencing people. And so my thought here is, like, I'm even thinking about who are the 150 people I should be connecting with. So I think that's the other thing I thought about, was like, everyone should just make their list and kind of keep checking it twice and keep cycling it out. So I think it's great tidbits coming from and pieces of information that come from this and tactics for you to be connected in a better way. So if you haven't checked it out, Success in Your Sphere by Zvi Band. Zvi, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. If people want to connect with you, how can they do it?
Yeah, honestly, there's only one Zvi Band out there, so I'm pretty easily Googleable.
Yep.
I think on Twitter, I'm at Skivis, Instagram, Zvi Band. I'm on Clubhouse. I got the Zvi name. However I can be of assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, the one and only Zvi Band. Thank you so much. The book, go check it out, download it, listen to it. We'll be giving some away. If you want to get one for free potentially, go out there in the conversation now on Twitter. Use the hashtag Contactually as well as Startup of Year, and we'll be giving some of those books away for those most interesting tidbits, quotes, and thoughts about this conversation. So thanks so much, Zvi. I really appreciate it. We'll keep in better touch. Obviously, I've got all these tips now. It's gonna be way better. Happy birthday, friend. We both share the same birthday every year.
Awesome. Frank, thanks so much for having me. Much love to you and the family.
All right, take care.